go ahead and get started. So welcome, happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Directors Roundtable. I think this is our fourth or fifth one of these. It's great to see all of you continuing to join these and collaborate and share your great ideas. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to join some of the other roundtables on the other topics. If you haven't, many of your staff have. We've been really pleased with the participation and continued engagement in this format. We're getting a lot of positive feedback around members finding value in these roundtables. And as I may have mentioned in the past, we'll continue to do them as long as there's demand. This will really be driven by member demand. So welcome again and happy Wednesday. Today, I've got a couple ideas around a couple of topics that we can move through, but as always, we will lean into whatever your topics are as well. If you haven't been with us before, please use the chat to ask questions. Erin and I will be monitoring the chat and trying to see those questions and get those responded to. Also share resources in the chat. I will say last week I learned an important Zoom thing. Those of you that were private messaging me through the chat, those aren't saved in the transcript, which is good because then it doesn't show up in the recording. But it also means all of you who volunteered to be a part of the work group that's going to look at some reopening guidelines, your names got lost because when we ended the call, all that private messaging went away. I do want to give an update about that. We are very close to forming a work group who is going to look at guidelines for reopening recreation. The invitations will go out later today to about 8 or 9 people who had volunteered for that role. Again, those of you that private messaged me, I'm sorry you didn't get included in the considerations, but there'll be more opportunities in the future. The goal for that group is to gather up everything that's being shared, on Connect, through email, in the Google Doc, put some organization to it, identify any gaps. To the extent there's gaps, then go out and try and find some resources around how to address some of those areas, and then get it published just as quickly as we can. So please continue to share resources with one another, post them in Connect, use the Google Doc, email each other. Many of you include me in those emails as you're sharing resources, and that's super helpful. I'll be pushing those to this work group. And in the meantime, we'll be trying to, again, create some organization, see what gaps are out there, and then produce a document. It may very much be a version 1 type document. We'll see how reopening evolves. And if there is a need for updated information or version 2 at a later date, we'll certainly take a look at that. My thought right now, and I'm interested in feedback on this, is that you all are actively grabbing all these resources as best you can, coming up with your own reopening plans, et cetera, and I'm sure you'll continue to do that. I think the NIRSA resource will be a good gut check against maybe wherever you are at in the process in terms of your own planning. Hopefully it's also a good resource to use with your university leadership. They may not want to crawl through all the details. I think the Google Doc is great for our internal use, but it's probably not something you're going to ask your VP to look at. So part of the audience for this NIRSA endorsed guidelines really is your campus leadership, your campus administration, and then of course you and your departments. Okay, so let's kick this off. There was a couple threads in our Directors Roundtable last week that I want to pick back up on, and one of them is around creating a culture of shared responsibility. I think last week we had some good conversation about all of the types of things we could consider implementing to ensure that the Recreation Center and its patrons are coming back in a way that's safe given this pandemic. And I think the conversation went to kind of an nth degree of all the things we could do. And then there was a bit of pullback towards what's reasonable to do, right? How do we stay within our lane of what our expertise is, what is reasonable given our resources, what's reasonable given our environment? And really a sense of, at the end of the day, we're going to have to create a culture of shared responsibility. Yes, the organization, the institution, the leadership running these facilities has an obligation to do some things, but the patrons, the students, the members also have an obligation to participate in that in a community well-being, public health kind of way. So I'd like it to open it up to anyone who has some thoughts or comments about how they're thinking about creating a shared sense of responsibility.
Since it's quiet, I think I'll go. But
there you go.
I think we're going to use signage a lot for a lot of that. I think that'll be, we haven't got the exact wording down, but before you ever walk past our turnstiles in the lobby, we will have some type of verbiage saying that we have done you know, these measures to react to COVID. It is still up to you to assume that surfaces that you touch are potentially contaminated, and you should take care and you know, use disinfectant and wash your hands before touching your face after anything else that you touch in the building. Something along those lines, because we haven't worked on it. I'll have my marketing people work on that, so it sounds better. But I think we need to let people know, and we certainly we put out more dispensing stations for that kind of stuff. But I think it'll be along the lines of, you just like you do at the grocery. I don't know how it's any different than you do at the grocery store. Now I don't know why our level is that much different than that either, but certainly we will do more than what I see being done at the grocery store as far as cleaning and taking care of that. But there you go.
Thanks, Ken.
I agree with Ken. And some of the things that he said in the last director's meeting, I think are really important about the dwell time. I think that's going to be a big issue that we deal with. But Scott Vandermoon posted in the on the listserv, I know we don't call it listserv anymore, sorry, old school, a really great document. And one of the things that I thought was good, besides the signage and communication, was the ready to clean tags. Really push for that. So if it's something that needs to be cleaned after someone uses it, there's a post-it note that goes on it, and our team, who will be walking relentlessly around the facility, can know that piece of equipment needs to clean. Because I'm very concerned that the task force that is deciding whether or not how we open isn't going to see our efforts. So I want to make sure that the student, as well as our team, has some, you know, shared work in keeping us clean.
Those are great ideas.
I'm sorry, this is Ashley Ballard from University of North Florida. I think one thing that's going to be important for us when I was speaking to my VP was figuring out if there's going to be a universal protocol throughout the university as far as wearing masks. You know, certain buildings, would they require mask wearing versus ours? So I think it's going to really be a support from the university setting, you know, those protocols across the campus to ensure that we're supporting what the university is saying as well.
Great point, Ashley.
This is Haley from Wyoming. One of the things that we've talked about, we actually have the okay to open right now. We got the go ahead. We have not opened yet because we're trying to create a plan to abide by all guidelines, but it is clearly in the government's public health release that my staff has to clean up after everybody. Our equipment needs to be 6 feet apart. We can't have more than 9 people in the building at one time, and that includes people working. And then I think that was my staff has to wear masks. So a lot of those things might be already set by your government. I don't know, but that's what was set at ours, at least.
So Haley, if only 9 people are allowed in the building at a time, is it feasible for you to open?
That's one of the things that we're kind of talking about. I don't know. I have to pay work studies too. And we are a small 2-year college, but I don't know if it's feasible. We're open to the community too, but I don't know if it's going to be manageable, because right now, if I have 2 staff, I only can have 7 people in there. So is it, and I'm at that crossroad too, is like, is it worth it to open? Like, who am I serving at this point? No students are on campus. I'd be serving employees and mainly community members that are still part of our gym. So
good. Mark, do you want to jump in? You had a comment in the chat about, beyond knowledge. How do we, more on the culture side of things, sometimes it's beyond knowledge to get people to behave in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fear, there's been plenty of knowledge. We've been inundated with knowledge, and of course there's new information coming out all the time, and that's important to stay on top of that. My guess is just like Ken mentioned with regards to the grocery stores, they put all the signage, they've done what they can, to the point where some of our grocery stores have greeters that will spray your hands beforehand. They'll let you know which carts have been wiped and all. That's great. They're doing the best they can. Then the second I step into the grocery store and there's a family of 4 where they recommend that only one family member come, they're not enforcing it. They're not coming around saying, hey, people, please. They'll put announcements. And so then it comes to us saying that I think pretty much our students and staff will have a general knowledge, and we're going to do our best practices of doing what we can and having regular wipe down. And I think it was David Bowles in the previous one saying, I can't wipe down the 24/7. The second someone gets on a machine, it's potentially contaminated. So we can do what we can. So I think that's a small piece of it, because we all know how to do that risk management. It now becomes that case where you have the naysayer who comes into the center, who is now saying, I don't believe in this, and they do not want to follow those protocols. How do we train, support, and our staff and patrons when that happens? Because we've seen it. It's caused a larger stress in our society. We've seen more confrontation. We've seen more shaming happening. And so now that's a whole different ballgame with our staff, especially student staff, who now need to become enforcers, where, even in the past when we had to ask staff to remind patrons, oh, remember, you got to wipe down your machine. Now we've just added this extra level of conflict, stress, and that's the concern I would have. Is I'm confident everyone here knows how to clean their machines and do that. It's how do we now take that enforcement to the next level, and should we? And what are the protocols for asking a patron to leave and saying, well, if you're not going to follow these guidelines, you can't come here. And that's going to be a larger challenge, I think.
Peter, do you want to jump in? Oh, go ahead, Leah.
Oh, sorry. Hi, everybody. I don't own this. I got this from obviously our friend Paul Wesselman, but I really think as part of this is acknowledging that what is different, because we're not designed to be socially distanced in what we do in our work. And so I think it's almost, there needs to be some communication, and like that this is different, right? And this is new. We still want to create community community in this space, help us figure out what that looks like now. And so I think that's really important to this conversation. So I just wanted to add that, and that's all, Paul.
Yeah, it's, are we going to use a carrot or a stick approach, or, maybe a little bit of both? And I was reading an interesting post from Seth Godin, is a fairly well-known marketer, the other day around, you have a choice in marketing, and, you can try and appeal to people's sense of community, or you can try and appeal to their selfishness, right? And often what works, sadly, is appealing to their selfishness, right? It wasn't do this for the good of the whole or do this for the good of the country. It was do this to keep yourself safe. Do this so your grandmother doesn't die, right? Under all the stay-at-home orders. And I think on the whole, we're all pretty positive people. We're in the business of creating, positive cultures around well-being. So I think some of that need to maybe look at a more selfish focused, strategy. I find, I'll speak for myself, I don't love it, right? But there's going to have to be a balance in here. Peter, I wanted to get you to jump in. At York, you're also considering, should we open, right? Just because we can doesn't maybe mean we should. I think you must be on mute, or maybe your mic's not working. Say something. Yeah, you're not muted, but your mic must be off. Maybe try hanging up and dialing back, and then we'll pick you up again. Who else would like to jump in on this?
Hey, Pam, I think the biggest challenge right now is just the barriers to participation were already high. You know, the high schoolers coming in with less physical activity, and that intimidation factor of the gym is not for me. So now we have this, people that are sensitive to germs or already have anxiety about you know, hygiene and stuff, to now have all these things with signage saying that we're cleaning extra, which is good, but it's just, I just think that's a big psychological thing, is we have a new group of incoming freshmen and transfers, and then how do we, as somebody had mentioned, how do we keep it positive? How do we say the outcomes of participation and the community building, even if we have to physical distance, and memories and experiences, and that out of the classroom benefits? Obviously, we have the benefits of campus recreation stuff, but how do we do that post-COVID, knowing that our numbers, because of physical distancing, could innately be lower, but also too, like, how do we convince people that even like to exercise, like to participate, they may also choose not to come in, and then their overall health and well-being may be lessened. So I think that's a big challenge from our kind of positions, to positively spin that we still want you to come, and the benefits of that.
Good points. Ian, do you want to jump in here? Let's see, do we see Ian Brown? He was active on the chat. Oh, Peter, are you back?
I'm back.
Great.
So we're in the process right now of creating a fall budget and a winter budget as well, based on whether or not we will have students back on campus and which students those will be, if it's grad only, if it's undergrad, and what are the numbers going to be like. So we're in the process of evaluating what that looks like from the number of students that are back. Also, we have to calculate in, at least for us at York University, the percentage of ancillary fee that we'll be receiving based on whether or not we're open, what type of virtual online program we're offering. And then of course, coupled with the less expenditures now on staffing that we may or may not be incurring, and as well as full-time staff, because there is possibly some full-time staff layoffs depending on how long it will be that we're physically back on campus. And this is of course for the province of Ontario. It's pretty across the board for us, where some of our peer provinces, Saskatchewan and New Brunswick, they're looking to be back come September. It's still very murky though across the board.
Interesting. Well, I imagine you are all knee-deep in scenario planning. Are there any questions you have for the group around how they're considering their scenarios? Peter just outlined one, how they're considering it on their campus.
I have a question for the group. Especially when we talk about being data driven, you know, there's a lot of people saying, okay, we got to collect data now and see what this is. And yet there's a whole school of thought saying any data we collect now is irrelevant because it's behaviors that aren't normal. And so taking this data and trying to plan for the future is just as hard, if not impossible. Yet I'm hearing a lot from people saying, well, our senior leadership is saying, well, I need data on your virtual programming and we need to move forward and go ahead and start planning that way. And I'm wondering what sort of pressures people are having with regards to getting data, which potentially is irrelevant, as well as pushing forward on initiatives that don't have any data to support that that's going to work either. And it just seems like this huge conundrum of senior leadership pushing to say, well, we got to reopen. And then it comes back to the whole goal seems to be reopening rather than servicing the students and focusing it on that, the student lens to say, well, what's the best way to service them during this time, rather than, no, we need to open our facilities by September.
Who would like to comment on that?
Greg Jordan.
Greg?
Greg Jordan here. I agree with your point about the data, because you're right, we're not being asked about that at all. But I think the pressure, if you will, our president was in our student affairs call last week, and her challenge, her expectation was to, be creative, be innovative, new, different, Those are the expectations that she was putting on us with regard to, we still need to connect. Now, I think we're pretty much of the assumption that there'll be some kind of hybrid model this fall, certainly not full face-to-face, but some, some kind of mix. At least here in Michigan, that's what she's thinking. So again, the pressure there was just to come up with the new and creative stuff and ways to continue to engage students in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks, Greg.
Pam, one of the things that I was in a conversation with our VP this morning, and just of interest if others are trying to find ways, and I was talking about if we had a chance to influence or help re-architect a day in the life of our campuses and universities, what is it? Is it a 20-minute break here and a 14-minute break? Like, what if we could help rewrite some new patterns of health and options of, and I was thinking back to the ingredients of a healthy brain, of move, nourish, connect, discover, relax. And just even as a small subset of all of the things that we touch and do, what could we now introduce to the academy to break patterns that need disruption? And both now in terms of the stress that everybody's under, but then what might be the oh, this was great, and now let's keep it. And then what's and I think her other challenge that we were talking about is if we could redesign even the hybrid and not just go to the default of a freshman or a sophomore class or grad students. What would a new list look like? How do you take the most at risk or the farthest that, everybody who lives within an hour doesn't get a bed on campus? Or how do you rethink our typical formulas of how we break into some of the subsets too?
Yeah, I think there's incredible opportunity there. How are others, how has this changed your thinking, fundamentally changed your thinking, or even maybe generated the questions to even start to make that transformation? Is your leadership leaning into these kind of inspiring questions?
This is Janice. So in California, Gavin Newsom has made it very clear that we don't open, or there's 6 things that need to happen before we can start to consider opening. And one of them is vaccinations and testing, more testing for everyone. So our university has 3 guiding things. One of them is academics, still delivering the best academic. The second is safety. So obviously, in order to open, we need to ensure that everybody is safe. And then the third thing is well-being, which is great. That well-being is one of the top words.
Yeah.
But part of it is just, we can't open and hope that everybody's well-being is good until we're ready, which means that we might be waiting until there is full-blown testing for everyone. Gyms ended up on stage 3 of Newsom's opening plan, and we're still only in stage 1. So thankfully I get to watch all of you open and figure out what's going to work best for us. But it makes it daunting because I really don't know how we could be open in the fall. And to Kathleen's point, when you're talking about the residence halls and you've got people sharing rooms and restrooms in our new suites, how do you manage that? Or you've got 25 people sharing the same restroom on the hall. It just, I think for us, we're probably not going to be open in the fall, which is a very daunting thing to say out loud. But I think it's just where we are in California.
And so then, Janice, does that inspire, your staff, your leadership to really think about how do we deliver, physical activity and well-being outside the walls of this building?
Yes, we have created some small work teams, and one of them is called Resiliency and Student and we are looking at 6, 12, and 18 months. Like, and that tells you right there, like if we're planning for 6 months, 12 and 18, that they're already thinking that we might not be in person in winter quarter, which is January to March, which is just, how do you welcome a first year class who didn't get a senior graduation? They'll provide services for them. So yes, I will be leading one of those small work teams that just got announced last Friday.
Yeah.
So more to come.
Hey Pam, this is Mark Crager from the University of Mississippi. Hey, one of the things, you know, I've been tasking our staff with is obviously we're going to have to do a lot of virtual programming. I mean, that's going to be a standard across the board, across the country. Our university has announced that we're actually going to have students in the fall. We are going to be back on campus 100% with students. Now, our programming may not look like that. For example, residence halls, and they are planning 1 student per room, you know, versus roommates and those type of things. And one of the things I'm really, really trying to hit with our staff is, as we're looking at programming and safety guidelines, whether it's, you know, 10 people can gather or whatever, you know, are there things we can do, you know, for example, intramurals? Is there a thing we can do with intramurals where, you know, 3-point contest, these students sign up for a time, they show up, they do the 3-point contest, they interact with our staff, you know, and they go on and they do it. Because one thing I want us to really, really make sure that we're thinking about is think about us, how we all got in this field, what made us love our college. You know, I know so many professionals that even are on this call that campus recreation saved our college. We found something that we needed within campus recreation, and part of that is the social factor. You know, what is that factor in the interaction that we had with, you know, our mentors, with our people that were at the rec center, with other students and other participants that are going there. And how do we still get that? Because we do not get that virtually. We can still provide programming that people can get fit, they can have some type of competition and that type of stuff, but there's not a lot of the physical, you know, social aspect that comes along with that. And so how can we do that safely within those guidelines? You know, and I don't know what the answer to that is. You know, until we know exactly what the guidelines are going to be, we won't know that either. We won't know exactly, but I think we ought to be thinking about that. How do we have some interaction with patrons, with students, with participants that does not isolate them from that? Because one of the psychology factors that are going on right now is how isolated people feel. Even though we're providing more virtual programming than probably ever in the history of the United States, so many students, so many faculty staff are feeling isolated. So how do we help do that? And from a safe standpoint, you know, how do we bring that? And like I said, I don't have any mystery answers to it, but I am challenging our staff that we've got to be thinking that way too. We just can't be thinking about, well, we usually run this, how can we run it virtual? Well, that's great. We're going to have to do that. But how can we also create some type of interaction with it? And so, you know, as we move forward, you know, I think it would benefit us greatly across the board as a profession. How do we do that? Because there's so many great thinkers that are much better than me. And I'd love for us all to be thinking that way so I can steal your ideas. I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, along with that, Mark, and Pam, I think I'd like to see if we couldn't partner with AEE and see what they're doing to address this issue of team building and experiential education, you know, with groups virtually and how we do that. I know we've seen some good things that they've put out already, but I think that would be a partnership to look into with us about how we would do that in these times. But I fear that we lose a piece of that. You know, even the survey I was doing today for the recreation movement thing had questions in there about how we're, and I'm like, stop pushing everybody to go online. You're missing out on that social piece. Like we've got to, we're concentrating on getting people back to a point where we can have that social piece for them, because I think that's our bread and butter. We're with that. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning AEE. You know, as Mark, as you were talking, I was thinking about any lessons from the counseling industry, right, who've had to go online, any lessons from telehealth, maybe even lessons from the career centers, right, who've now had to, you know, work with students for however long virtually versus in person. And going back to your comments about how do we, you know, mentor and create relationships, there may be some lessons from all those groups we can draw on. Well, similar to, you know, taking care of people, which appears to be the, you know, the real underpinnings of our job. I also wanted to ask about how you're all feeling and managing staff through all of this. You know, I think in a lot of the conversations around some enthusiasm to, you know, get back and reopen and see people in person, we also will be confronted with staff who don't feel safe coming back, right? And who maybe aren't ready, and, you know, for real or perceived reasons. So how are you thinking about how to manage your staff and create a culture where they feel a sense of health and safety themselves, and how we manage them coming back? Are any of you getting resistance to your staff coming back, and how are you handling that?
Pam, is Greg. No, I'm not getting resistance. I think it's more concern.
Yeah.
You know, I think many of the guidelines that we're seeing are, you know, the employers have a responsibility and a duty to provide PPE and a safe environment. And I think there's been several comments already on the call today about, you know, safety is, you know, number one or number two. So I think, you know, what is that actually looking like, and who is supplying it? And what kind of supply? So is it cloth masks? Is it disposable masks? Are you going to get a gown? What about gloves? So I think as our institutions are navigating that planning, that is directly impacting about how safe do our staffs feel about coming back. And I, you know, I think your question is in the context of professional staff, but I think we're hearing it loud and clear from our student employees as well too. You know, some of them are saying, hey, I need the hours, but I'm not willing to risk my life, you know, for minimum wage, you know, to, you know, work in a weight room. So I think it's more the concern as opposed to pushback, at least at this point in time.
Yeah, if any of you are still dealing with helicopter parents, I imagine they may, you know, start calling again about the safety of their students. So how are you creating an open dialogue with your staff about what this looks like? What seems to allay their concerns? Wendy, did you want to jump in?
Pam, this is Mark again.
Yeah.
I will. You know, we're lucky here that our city required masks, and they require masks for you to go in the stores or anything, and not just employees. So our students that have stayed in town, and there have been a lot that are ready to go back to work and have already overcame that. Because they have to wear masks now and everything that they do here. And so they feel very comfortable. We just had our award ceremony over Zoom on Thursday night, and we stayed after to talk and to chat, and we probably had about 50 of our employees. It was like, man, when are we going to open again? We're ready, you know, we're ready to be up there. And I asked them if they felt, you know, nervous or that, and they said, no, you know, we've been dealing with it for the last, you know, month at kind of a high alert status because the city's made them wear masks and everything. They've gotten over the shock of, you know, I got to go out, I got to wear a mask to go outside, you know, that type of shock. So it's worked pretty well, I think, in our favor. Now, a lot of our students that aren't local, that are kind of just the day-to-day workers that aren't as engaged with us as most, you know, are really good workers, they weren't on there. So they could have a different take because they're back home in a different city or wherever, and don't seem to, you know, we don't know what their feelings are from it, but I can definitely see it. But I think the quicker we go to it, the quicker they get over it. I think that shock, that initial shock, is what's really going to affect so many people.
And Wendy?
Yeah, so we overall have a fairly young staff team, and we've tried to be really supportive and nurturing through this process with lots of transparency, piggybacking off a lot of stuff Leah Hall, Dorothy talked about around gratitude. We've done lots of gratitude work through this process, and I think it's opened up a comfortableness for folks to share. I've been trying to be real transparent with our group on what do they think is doable and not doable, even though at the end of the day, I know there's going to be bigger folks at a senior level driving some decisions that we may not be comfortable with, giving them the opportunity to express their concerns. And so they're doing some exercises with me on what do we think is doable, what would we need to put in place, what do we think is not doable, understanding that there may be directions we have to go, but I think really being committed to that process of engaging them through the conversation versus creating an opening plan in a vacuum and then just getting prepared to tell them here's what we're doing. I've had to support staff who have actually physically left the area to go to another state to work from home. They just needed that support, and crossing my fingers they're going to come back. But I think the other concern is because we're in such a shared space with athletics and academic programs, and we're connected through bridges and 3 different buildings make up our complex, that we don't have control over how the other departments are going to want to operate. And so our work right now is really about synthesizing that, because our student employees are concerned about how they're going to interface with athletes who just already do what they want to do and walk through spaces that they shouldn't be, and how we're going to do wayfinding throughout the building. So they are concerned about their physical safety, really concerned about first responder actions and what happens when we need to treat somebody in a close proximity. And so right now it's really just letting them voice those concerns in a way that I think they need support. They need to hear that you're hearing them, and that we're not just putting an operational plan in place to get back open. It's interesting being in the region that I'm in now, where I think we probably are seeing a push to open. We've had less outbreak, and being in the South, folks are like, let's just get back to normal. And our staff are like, well, we're not ready. We don't feel like it's safe. We're going to have an uptick again of a resurgence. So being prepared and really hearing them out and having a game plan so that if we begin to see that, or if we have an outbreak, that we've really thought through what those scenarios could look like. And also creating lots of options and alternatives, that there is no single plan that we can hang our hat on. So what could option A look like? What could B? What could X, Y, and Z? And we need to be prepared to shift at any moment.
Yeah, really smart. Thank you, Wendy. Anyone else want to jump in on that? Some great conversation going on in the chat. So Ken had brought up a partnership, a potential partnership, or maybe some shared resources earlier, some learnings through the experiential education group. I have a question for the group around what other groups on campus would it be helpful to hear from, in the coming weeks. So, for example, I know many of you partner with orientation around the back to school season and all the orientation programming that goes over the course of the summer and the early fall, and that all has to be rethought. So would it be helpful in the coming weeks to hear from some orientation folks on one of these ideas in motion? I wonder about the folks who work in, facilities and physical plant, right? Would it be helpful to hear from some of them about how they're approaching all of these building concerns in other areas of campus? And you can chime in verbally or pop it into the chat around what other groups through NIRSA's external partnerships would be helpful to you to hear from, either through Ideas in Motion or, some of their resources on the COVID-19 page. So Steph says a roundtable with those who are already open. That'd be great. Orientation.
Hi, Pam. Can I?
Sure.
Pam McCarron from WPI. I just want you to know that we have started a conversation, and we're meeting every other week with our Director of Environmental and Health Safety, as well as our Facility Director, to kind of share ideas, what they're already planning, so we can incorporate what they're thinking. And they basically have given us 3 things to look at: what's feasible, what's supportable, and what can we execute. So those are 3 things that as we're planning and putting together our timeline, that we're trying to develop. But meeting with the director of health, environmental and health safety has really helped us, because they're already thinking about masks and gloves and what we have to do before we even open, because they're going to give us that directive. So just some thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Great ideas.
I think, Pam, one of the big questions is going to be the programs, including intramural sports and sport clubs, and, you know, are they going to mirror NCAA and athletics? And you would hope that you could advocate for those individuals, whatever the NCAA and the athletics realm does. But that's a huge factor in the health and well-being of those individuals that participate. That's their way of getting physical well-being and community and social connectedness. So, and that's a big decision, because if those programs are not permitted, especially the rugbies and the things where there's high contact and germs, that's a huge, even the workload for the sport clubs administration and staff, if they're not overseeing that, what are they supposed to be doing during the fall semester? So that's a big one as far as the programming side goes, for those high contact, large groups, and as far as activities go.
That's a great point, Kevin, right? You know, if those playing either sport club or varsity sports get their sense of physical health and community from those opportunities, and they may not have those this fall. So, you know, even back to Kathleen's point, how do we rethink this, right? So then what's their experience, and what are their other opportunities to have that sense of community, to have that sense of well-being, to pay attention to their physical and mental health. And there actually may be some opportunities for recreation to deliver that in ways they haven't in the past. Great point.
Pam's Greg. I totally agree, Kevin, with your perception about looking at you know, how the NCAA decision making might influence us in that regard. However, because those resources are so vast, I think we're thinking around here more that we might be looking at our local high school associations and what their approach, whether it be at the state level or the local conferences, because I think that's much more you know, maybe consistent with resources we have available within university recreation.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, just to follow up on Greg. So are you planning that if your local high schools go back to having sports, you're like, all right, we're gung-ho, we're going to have sport clubs and we're going to have intramurals? Or are you still being a little more cautious with that? And Kevin too. I mean, that's the boat we're all in. But what are people thinking on that?
Well, to answer your question, I think you know, unfortunately, it's more of a wait and see. And I think we have to keeping safety and even talking about if we're getting into rental groups. One of the things we've been saying as well, the rental group is going to have to be able to demonstrate that they can maintain safety and you know, the well-being of their participants. So I think if I'm kind of dodging it because I don't really have a great answer, but if the conditions are right that we think that it can be safely played, then yeah, why not? But you know, it's interesting hearing the conversation, because on the one hand, in Mississippi, they're going to open in a couple months, and Janice out in California is, you know, a year and a half from now may just be opening up. So that's a really broad range right now.
Yeah, I think it's important, Pam, that we have to educate upper level administration just how unique we are, different from academics and classrooms, that we are a high usage facility, germs and communities, I guess you would say, large groups. And, you know, we could mirror some of the things with campus or student activities, but I think educating them that we're just unique. I mean, I think we have to really talk to our liability and risk about the safety precautions and how we're just different than other entities, you know, with even admissions tours and orientation. That so I think that we want to make sure we cover our CYA with our legal and risk, making sure that we look at best practices. But even, especially those sport clubs, they won't have leagues if half the teams are not able to participate. So even the leagues they're associated with, it's just, do they have a hybrid schedule, or they play each other more often, and the distance is available. So I think that's just a lot of moving parts to determine if, and we have, you know, over 1,400 sport club athletes, and, you know, it'd be tough for them to not be able to participate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to take a little bit broader view now. We have about 15 minutes left, so I'll throw out a question, but if you have other questions for the group that you want to make sure we get to before the end, please put them in the chat. What are your feelings right now about whether this will cause permanent changes to our industry? Either positive or challenging, what are you thinking about that yet? What are you seeing?
So I'll jump in a little bit because our staff have had some conversation around this.
Mm-hmm.
Being a smaller school, how much resource we have to devote to virtual programming and wanting to have a hybrid model, but also knowing that there are so many folks from an entrepreneurial end pushing virtual programming because it becomes a new business for a third party, for a commercial entity. And going off of what other folks have already said around the social connections, the value of community, I do think it is important for us as an association and as leaders in collegiate rec to keep that front and center in terms of promoting this blended model and what the future could look like without being too extreme one end or the other, because you can't replace the communities that we're building on our campuses. And while there may be more virtual access in the future, what we're hearing from our students that have been pushed into an online world, they don't like it. And there are some students who choose online because that's their preferred method and they're already doing that. But the students who are choosing in-person classes, I don't see that changing down the road. And I do think at some point we are going to get comfortable again with those relationships and those interactions. I don't know how long it will take for us to get back to that. And so all these ideas that folks are sharing around creating opportunities to stay and keep people engaged. My IM group was joking around yesterday. They're like, let's put our intramural staff in stripes as referees, put them on informal rec, and we can still do things like badminton and pickleball. And anytime someone drops the ball, the ref picks it up, disinfects it, and they get a new ball. If they touch their face, they get a penalty. Like, they're talking about creative ways, and like, think about rugby, you could still do some activities, you know, sled practice, you could do drills where you have them spaced apart. They just need the leadership and the coaching to create those safe parameters. And I think that is critical for us. We put all this energy, and everybody right now is doing all this online virtual programming, which we're definitely doing as well. But I think we need to keep it in check in terms of our priorities.
Hey, Pam, this is Bill. I'm going to add on to what Wendy just said, but I'm going to give it from an anecdotal lens here. Our industry has transformed multiple times, and we didn't even realize it's transformed. Even though it's transformed, a lot of the sameness stays. So I don't see it being necessarily challenging or negative or positive. I see differences coming, and I see us adapting, evolving, and bringing them back into what we would call our industry. And the reason why I say that is, look at esports a few years ago. Some folks looked at it as a threat. It's not a threat. We've evolved, we've adapted it, we've incorporated it. Active shooters, right? Everyone said that would transform the industry of mass gathering areas like campus rec centers. We've adapted, we've changed, we've evolved into planning and doing things like that. So every time there's been, and I just use one example, but every time there's been these transformative or disruptive events, it necessarily hasn't changed who we are. It's just caused us to evolve and adapt and continue. But at the end of the day, people still strive for that connectiveness. They strive for the socialization. They strive for the competition. They strive for the things that make us who we are. So I don't see that disappearing. I just have to figure out how we're going to get to where we're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Well said, Bill, and I absolutely love your backgrounds. I think that, you know, Pam, what you're saying, and exactly what Bill's saying, we have changed. Our industry has changed in almost a blink of an eye. But what's kind of exciting is that we, the people on this call, the people in our industry, are such change agents, and we are so stinking creative and amazing. We're going to take this and take campus recreational sports to the next level. Like, I already know that we're going to do that. It's just a matter of us all putting our heads together and figuring out how it works in each of our institutional, you know, cultures. And I think that's super exciting. That's what keeps me going, because right now I'm very frustrated because there's so many unknowns by not only the government, but our own administrations. You know, the government may say one thing, but our school might get super concerned and scared and want to, you know, everyone in mass, let's do 10 feet. You know, I don't know what they're going to do, but they could make it even more challenging. So I just feel like we're in this place of the unknown, but we will come together and we will adapt this profession. But I think we're forever changed in some way, one way or another. It's just what we do with it. And that's what excites me every day, is I jump on all these roundtables, is to hear all these creative ideas and how people are managing their struggles and what we can all get from that. That's what, you know, as I think someone said earlier, like, why we're in this, I think Mark, why we're in this profession, like, this is why, because we're going to come out of this way ahead, and the people that are going to be blessed by it are going to be the students. Like, we are going to manage this and make this season, this transition to the new rec sports, amazing for students. So yeah.
I'd like to piggyback on what Steph just said eloquently and Bill started. This morning, our VP was talking about the next normal. And I was, you know, thinking that it was the right sort of frame, that we have to be forward looking. You know, I do think that we've got to be careful and cautious, because it is a fine line of where we can still, I think, poke up and influence, you know, as a core institutional asset and a must-have, or becoming irrelevant if we just miss some of these really important moments together. But I think it's a new whiteboard too. And so I think we've just got to be, you know, and we've done that. One of the earlier comments that I just wanted to offer about the behavior, when I think about how many ways we have helped to shape behavior, we went through in the competitive sports era with sportsmanship. And who would have thought that we could be effective? And we were completely effective out through very competitive national championships and inspiring different behaviors. So I think we've got the tools in our toolkit. They just need to, they have to have a different, you know, forward look to them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kathleen and Stephanie. Haley?
Yes, sorry, my children.
Okay.
I think for me, we're a small community colleges. We're only a 2-year. We do a lot of workforce training. And so I see this really positive for us, because it's really made me look at our delivery system of how we're delivering rec and wellness to people who don't live on campus. I would say 40 to 50% of the people that go to Northwest College don't live on campus, and they are participating in my rec programs more than ever. I've seen people participate that I've never seen before, and we're a very small school, only about 1,500 students. So it's kind of exciting in that way of like, okay, I'm tapping this new area that's never been tapped before, and how do we keep this going? So that's what I look at it from a 2-year standpoint, where it's a commuter college, and just looking at how can I continue delivering the rec and wellness the way it's been delivered.
Thanks, Haley. Who else would like to jump in? Yeah, I think there is an opportunity here to, hopefully this pandemic has a positive effect on individuals' commitment to their health and what that means, right? And that hopefully one of the lessons learned is that you were more likely to, not get sick, or if you contracted the disease, recover if you were healthy. And that included your immune system, that includes your physical and mental health, that includes all those basic health markers. And so will we actually see some renewed energy around individuals wanting to incorporate more healthy habits, right? I hope that is true. I really hope that is true. And I think we can be part of society that inspires that. And, to some of Mark's points, making sure that we're not inadvertently creating a culture that what we offer is for elite athletes, or what we offer is for those that are already fit and are already healthy and are already thriving, right? I think there's a new opportunity in all of this. NIRSA has long talked about, the roughly 20% that we don't reach, right? So in all of this, this is yet another opportunity to really think hard about, amongst all this change that we're going to make and we're going to reconsider, and we're really going to talk through now how we deliver our programs and services to have that positive effect on health and well-being and student success. So is there also an opportunity in all of this to do a better job at attracting those who hadn't been coming to our rec centers? And Haley, it sounds like you're already having some success with that. We're seeing some increased participation in numbers. That's really inspiring. I'm glad you shared that with the group. Okay, we have about 3 minutes left. Thank you for all your participation today. As always, message me if you have ideas around how NIRSA can help. What are the tools and resources you need? I appreciate the ideas earlier about some of the cross-campus collaborations that would be helpful to engage in. If there are other groups, if there are other internal resources, if there are other delivery mechanisms that would be helpful to you and your departments at this time, please don't hesitate to message me. Any final last-minute comment anyone feels compelled to jump in with? Thank you, thank you. All right, well, happy Wednesday of week 8. It's great to see all of you, and it's great to end on such a positive, inspiring note. Take care.